The city streets were slick with rain, the neon signs reflecting in puddles like shards of color scattered across the asphalt. Amara pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, the chill of the night creeping through the thin fabric. Another late shift at the cafe, another long walk home ahead. She sighed, glancing at her watch, 11:47 p.m. Almost midnight, but she wasn't the type to complain. Work was work, and bills didn't pay themselves. The cafe door jingled as she pushed it open, the familiar warmth and aroma of roasted coffee beans washing over her. The night was quiet, the usual crowd of late-night wanderers and tired office workers thinning out. She wiped down tables with mechanical precision, arranging chairs, sweeping crumbs, and occasionally tossing a friendly nod to the few regulars who lingered after their lattes. That's when she noticed him. He sat in the far corner, hunched over a laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating a face set in exhaustion. His hair was slightly disheveled, and a faint crease between his brows suggested worry, or perhaps just concentration. She didn't know what drew her attention, but something about his quiet intensity made her pause. "Would you like some water?" she asked gently, approaching his table with a tray in her hands. He looked up, startled, and then his face softened into a polite smile. "Thank you. I'm fine, really," he said, but there was a hint of gratitude in his voice. Amara shrugged lightly, setting the tray down anyway. "I insist. Nights like these can be long." He nodded, accepting the glass she poured. "I suppose you're right." She smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You've been coming here a lot lately." "Late nights." He hesitated for a moment, then chuckled softly, a sound that didn't quite match the weariness in his eyes. "Something like that. Work keeps me busy, and I guess I like the quiet here." "Quiet can be nice," she said, tilting her head. "It helps clear your mind." They didn't speak much after that, but she found herself glancing at him from across the room while she worked. There was something unspoken in his presence, a kind of weight he carried silently. Amara, accustomed to her small worries and modest life, felt a flicker of curiosity. Who was this man who came here every night, cloaked in exhaustion, yet somehow commanding attention without trying? The night wore on. The cafe's lights dimmed slightly as the clock ticked closer to closing time. Amara prepared to lock the doors, wiping the counters one last time. The man was still there, typing away, occasionally pausing to sip his water. She approached again, hesitating before speaking. "You've been here a long time. Don't you think it's time to go home?" she asked gently. He looked up, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I should, yes. But there's always something I need to finish." "Understand," she replied softly. "But sometimes finishing isn't as important as rest." He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her words, and then nodded. "You might be right. Thank you, really. It's rare someone cares enough to say that." Amara shrugged, cheeks warming slightly. "It's nothing. I just notice things. And maybe I like helping people." He smiled again, this time more sincerely, and for a fleeting moment, the tension in his shoulders seemed to ease. The clock struck midnight, and Amara began shutting down the cafe for the night. She pulled on her coat, securing the buttons against the cold. He packed his laptop into a sleek leather bag, standing to leave. "Good night," she said, offering a small wave. "Good night," he replied, his voice quieter this time. And then, after a pause, "Thank you for tonight." "For noticing." She smiled, stepping outside into the rain-slick streets. The city lights blurred through the droplets on the pavement, but she felt a warmth inside her chest, a quiet satisfaction, knowing she had made a small difference in someone's night. She didn't know his story, his name, or why he seemed so burdened, but somehow, helping him felt important. As she walked home, she glanced back at the cafe. The man had disappeared into the night, swallowed by the city's endless hum. She didn't know if she would ever see him again, but for now, the image of his grateful smile lingered in her mind. And that was enough. Little did she know, the man she had helped so kindly that night was no ordinary man. In another world, far removed from the quiet streets and simple cafes she called life, he commanded empires, made decisions that affected thousands, and carried a weight far heavier than she could ever imagine. But for tonight, he was just a man, tired and human, and she had treated him with the only thing he truly longed for, genuine kindness. And that was the beginning of everything. Amara didn't see him the very next night. She had expected to, almost unconsciously, but the cafe remained quiet, her customers trickling in and out like usual. Still, she found herself glancing toward the far corner every time she passed a table, half expecting to see him hunched over his laptop. When he didn't appear, she felt a strange pang of disappointment she didn't entirely understand. The following evening, though, he returned. The bell over the door jingled just as it had the night before, and there he was, same disheveled hair, same tired eyes, same quiet demeanor. He had a different laptop bag tonight, sleeker than the last, and a small leather notebook tucked beneath his arm. But the aura of weariness was unmistakable, and Amara felt the familiar tug of concern. "Good evening," she said with a small smile as she approached. "You again?" He looked up, startled for a brief second, then relaxed into a soft smile. "Hello. I seem to have a habit, don't I?" "You could say that," she replied, setting down a glass of water. "It's nice to see a familiar face." He chuckled softly, a sound that seemed almost out of place in the quiet cafe. "It's comforting, I suppose." Amara paused, considering her words. Comforting in a good way, or the other way? He gave her a sidelong glance, and for a moment, she thought he might answer honestly, reveal the burdens he carried. Instead, he smiled faintly, eyes distant. "Good way. Definitely a good way." As she turned to wipe down a nearby table, she noticed him observing her. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but there was a gentleness in his gaze that made her stomach flutter unexpectedly. She shook her head, tried to dismiss the strange sensation. He was just a man, just someone who came here to work. That was all. The night settled into a rhythm. She brought him refills without being asked, tidied the area around his table, and occasionally asked small questions about his work. He answered politely, never offering more than necessary, yet always with a quiet warmth that drew her in. Over the next few weeks, their routine solidified. He arrived at the cafe almost like clockwork, late enough to miss the busy dinner crowd, but early enough to catch the night calm. Amara noticed the patterns, how he favored a corner seat by the window, how he ordered the same chamomile tea each night, how he seemed to carry the same subtle weight in his posture. And she helped him, always. Sometimes it was small, a napkin when he spilled a drop of tea, a gentle adjustment of his chair, a quick word of encouragement when he sighed heavily over his screen. Other times, it was simply being there, a quiet presence in the background, unintrusive yet attentive. "Another long night?" she asked once, carrying his tea across the room. He glanced up, exhaustion lining his features, and nodded. "Yes, deadlines. Meetings. More deadlines. You know how it is." She smiled sympathetically. "I do. Sometimes it feels like no matter how much you do, it's never enough." He considered her words for a moment, and then, unexpectedly, he spoke softly. "Exactly. That's exactly it. It's like running on a treadmill that keeps getting faster." Amara's heart softened. She wanted to say something comforting, something profound, but the right words eluded her. Instead, she offered the only thing she could. "You're doing your best. That has to count for something." He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time she noticed a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. He nodded slowly. "Thank you. That actually helps more than you might realize." As nights passed, their connection deepened, though neither of them named it. There were small moments. The way he would look up just as she approached, the way she felt a thrill at catching his eye, the shared smiles that lingered longer than necessary. And still, he remained a mystery. She noticed little things. His suit was always crisp and expensive. His watch gleamed with sophistication, but she never allowed herself to dwell on them. It didn't matter. She didn't care about wealth or status. Her world was smaller, quieter, simpler. She only cared that he seemed to need her kindness, and she wanted to give it freely. One particularly quiet night, a storm raged outside. Rain hammered against the windows, and the cafe's lights flickered with the occasional gust of wind. Most customers had left early, leaving only Amara and him in the warm glow of the lamps. "You must enjoy nights like this," he said suddenly, eyes following the rain as it streaked down the glass. She tilted her head, curious. "Why do you say that?" "Because everything feels slower, calmer. You can think without interruption. You can breathe without everyone else demanding something." Amara nodded, understanding more than she let on. "I do like nights like this. They make the world feel manageable." He smiled faintly, and for a moment, the world outside disappeared. It was just the two of them, surrounded by the comforting hum of the cafe, the scent of coffee and rain blending into something almost magical. Days turned into weeks, and the routine became a small, unspoken bond. He trusted her in subtle ways, letting her bring him tea without asking, occasionally sharing small jokes, occasionally allowing a rare glimpse of frustration or exhaustion. And she, in turn, felt a growing fondness for him, a warmth that spread quietly through her chest whenever he smiled, whenever he spoke with that understated sincerity. Yet beneath the comfort, there was a subtle tension. Something about him felt larger than life, though she couldn't place it. She dismissed the thought quickly. It didn't matter who he was or what he did. He was just a man needing help, and she had it to give. One night, as she closed the cafe, she found herself lingering near the doorway, watching him pack his things. He paused, looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, the distance between them seemed smaller, the world less cold. "Thank you, Amara," he said quietly, "for being here and for noticing me." She smiled, cheeks warming. "I told you it's nothing. I just like helping people." He nodded, and she sensed he wanted to say more, but he didn't. Instead, he offered a gentle, fleeting smile and stepped into the rain-soaked night. Amara watched him go, the sound of the storm surrounding him like a shield, and she felt something she couldn't quite name. A connection, a promise, a quiet hope. She didn't know who he truly was, didn't know the life he led beyond the cafe walls. But for now, that didn't matter. Tonight, as always, she had helped someone in need. And perhaps, in the quietest way, he had helped her too. For the first time, she wondered what it would be like to know him fully. Not just the man who came in at night, tired and polite, but the man behind the tired eyes, the soft smiles, and the subtle, unspoken weight he carried. Little did she know, the truth of his identity was far more extraordinary than she could ever imagine. And yet, the bond they were forming, built on kindness and quiet understanding, was already beginning to change both their lives in ways neither of them could foresee. The city never truly slept, but to Amara, the nights were quieter than the days. She had grown used to the rhythm, the hum of traffic outside, the occasional distant siren, the soft clinking of cups and spoons inside the cafe. Yet, even in the quiet, life demanded attention. Bills piled up on the small wooden table at home. The washing machine groaned under the weight of too many clothes, and the refrigerator was half empty once more. She carried on, though, because she had no choice. Her younger brother depended on her. Every paycheck, every tip, every extra hour counted. She moved through her life with a sense of quiet determination, masking exhaustion with small smiles and careful efficiency. Yet, despite the struggle, she found solace in the cafe. It was her small kingdom of order in a chaotic world, a place where she could help, even if only in small ways, and feel useful. And lately, her nights had been colored by one particular visitor, the man who had appeared in the corner seat, night after night. He had become an anchor in her otherwise monotonous routine, though she would never have admitted it aloud. There was something about him, something quietly human that stood in stark contrast to the city's harshness. And yet, she knew nothing of his life outside these four walls. Meanwhile, the man carried his own unseen burdens. To the world, he appeared calm, composed, even commanding, but beneath the tailored suit and polished shoes lay a weight most could never imagine. His name was Ethan, and he was no ordinary man. CEO of one of the city's most influential corporations, he navigated a world of relentless deadlines, boardroom politics, and high-stakes decisions that could affect thousands. Every night, when the world outside demanded perfection, he came to the cafe to breathe, to escape, and, most unexpectedly, to find a small measure of peace in Amara's presence. Ethan's life was structured, rigorous, and often lonely. Friends were few, genuine connections rarer still. Family ties were strained by expectation and obligation, leaving him with little more than cold dinners and late-night phone calls. Yet, in the warmth of the cafe, with the soft glow of lamps and the quiet presence of a woman who treated him without pretense, he found something he hadn't felt in years: normalcy. It was during one particularly rainy night that the contrast between their lives became impossible to ignore. Amara wiped down tables, the soft scent of lemon cleaner mixing with coffee and the lingering aroma of rain outside. Ethan sat in his usual corner, fingers flying across the keyboard as he typed with methodical urgency. His brows were drawn tight, a subtle tension in his jaw betraying exhaustion he refused to acknowledge aloud. "You seem more tense than usual," Amara said gently, carrying a steaming cup of tea to his table. She placed it beside his laptop, hands lingering slightly longer than necessary. "Everything okay?" Ethan paused, staring at the tea as if seeing it for the first time. "It's just work," he replied finally, voice low and controlled. "Deadlines, board meetings, the usual chaos." Amara's lips pressed together, thoughtful. "I've noticed," she said softly, "and I think it's okay to admit it gets to you. Everyone has limits." For a moment, he looked at her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "Limits," he repeated quietly, almost to himself. "Yes, I suppose I've been ignoring mine for far too long." She offered a small smile, the kind that didn't judge but simply acknowledged his human struggle. "Sometimes it helps just to talk, or even to have someone notice you're trying. You don't always have to be strong for everyone else." He swallowed hard, emotions flickering behind his calm facade. No one, no board member, no assistant, no family member, ever said such things to him. But here she was, a stranger in some ways, yet a mirror to the humanity he had long buried under ambition and duty. "I appreciate that," he murmured, voice quieter than the rain outside. "Truly, it's rare." Amara's eyes softened. "You're welcome. Just remember, help is never weakness." She moved to tidy the counter, pretending to be occupied, but her mind lingered on him. There was more to this man than she could see, she realized. She couldn't know the magnitude of his world, nor did she need to, but she could feel the weight he carried, and in her own way, she wanted to ease it. Back at home later, the city lights casting reflections across her modest apartment, Amara paused to check the bills on the small kitchen table. The numbers always seemed overwhelming, each envelope a reminder of responsibility. She let out a long breath, then glanced at her brother, sleeping soundly on the sofa after a long day at school. She loved him fiercely, fiercely enough to endure exhaustion, loneliness, and the endless grind. Yet, as she thought of Ethan, the man whose life she glimpsed only in the quiet hours of the night, she realized that even amid struggle, connection mattered. That brief moment of understanding and small kindness could make someone feel less alone, no matter how heavy their burdens. For Ethan, the nights with Amara became more than routine. They became sanctuary. In the harsh fluorescent lights of the corporate world, surrounded by calculated conversations and carefully measured smiles, he longed for the simplicity of her presence. Her voice, soft but firm, reminded him that life wasn't only about deadlines or profits. It was about human connection, trust, and moments of kindness. He found himself thinking of her outside the cafe, wondering how someone so ordinary, so unaffected by wealth or power, could possess such depth and intuition. Each night, as he left, he felt a tug he could not name, a longing that was unfamiliar yet profoundly compelling. Yet beneath the comfort, tension simmered. He had no plan to reveal the truth of his identity. Not yet. He feared it would change everything, destroy the simple, genuine connection they had built. And Amara, unaware, continued to help him, believing him to be just another tired man in the night. Their lives, so starkly different, were bound by these small, unseen struggles. She fought exhaustion, financial pressure, and responsibility. He fought isolation, expectation, and the crushing weight of power. And every night, in the glow of the cafe lamps, they found solace in each other, unspoken and unacknowledged yet powerful. It was a delicate balance, a fragile dance on the edge of revelation. And neither of them knew how quickly it could tip, how a single moment could shatter assumptions and ignite possibilities neither had imagined. But for now, in the quiet of the night, with rain tapping softly against the window and the aroma of tea and coffee filling the air, they shared something rare: understanding. And sometimes that alone was enough to carry them through the unseen struggles of the world outside. As Amara closed the cafe later that night, she lingered at the door, watching Ethan disappear into the wet streets once again. Her chest felt unexpectedly tight, not from worry, but from a feeling she didn't yet name. Something was changing, something gentle, slow, and inevitable. And in the shadows of his own high-rise apartment, Ethan looked at his reflection in the glass window, thinking of her smile, her patience, her kindness, and wondering if someone like her could exist in his world. Maybe, just maybe, she could change it too. The nights had begun to feel different for Amara. What once was simply part of her routine, the soft hum of the cafe, the quiet clatter of cups, the smell of coffee, had gained a new layer of meaning. Each evening, she found herself anticipating his arrival. The man in the corner with the tired eyes and the quiet presence that seemed to command attention without effort. It was a Thursday when it happened, one of those nights when rain poured steadily, drumming on the roof in a rhythm that almost matched her heartbeat. She had just finished wiping the counters when the bell above the door rang, and there he was, carrying the same sleek leather bag he always did, his hair slightly mussed from the rain. "Evening," she said with a warm smile. "You're just in time for the storm." He looked up, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I suppose it adds ambience," he replied lightly, though she noticed the exhaustion lingering in his eyes. As she poured him a cup of chamomile tea, he glanced at her, curiosity flickering behind his calm gaze. "You seem brighter tonight. Or perhaps it's just the lights." Amara chuckled softly. "I don't think it's the lights. Maybe it's just the calm before the storm." He tilted his head, considering her words. "Or maybe it's the storm itself." For a moment, the conversation hung between them, light but charged. There was a subtle shift in the air, a softness that neither of them could ignore. She felt her chest tighten slightly, though she dismissed it as a reaction to the storm outside. Yet, when he looked at her, really looked, she caught a trace of something unfamiliar: appreciation, interest, and perhaps connection. Over the next hour, their conversation drifted from small talk to something deeper. He spoke in brief, careful sentences about his work, never revealing specifics, but hinting at the immense pressure he faced. And she, in turn, spoke of her family, her modest apartment, and the quiet struggles she navigated every day. He listened intently, never interrupting, and when she finished, he offered words of empathy that felt genuine, uncalculated. "You seem remarkably composed," he said finally, his voice softer than usual. "Despite everything." Amara shrugged, smiling faintly. "I suppose we all find ways to survive. Some of us just do it quietly." "I envy that," he admitted, and she caught the vulnerability in his tone. "I envy the simplicity of it." She paused, placing her hand on the counter, considering how to respond. Simplicity isn't always easy, but it's honest, and there's something comforting about that. You see the world clearly, without pretense. He nodded slowly, eyes meeting hers. For a heartbeat, the distance between them seemed to shrink, and the cafe, the rain, the dim lights, the soft clinking of cups, became a private universe where only the two of them existed. Over the following nights, this quiet bond grew stronger. Small gestures began to carry weight. She would refill his tea before he asked, rearrange his papers without a word, and sometimes offer a quiet joke when his lips twitched with a suppressed smile. He began to notice her in subtle ways. How she tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, how she hummed softly while wiping tables, how her eyes lit up briefly at small moments of kindness from strangers. One night, as she brought him his tea, he looked up with a faint smile that made her stomach flutter unexpectedly. "You know," he began carefully, "I think I look forward to these nights more than I should." Amara froze for a fraction of a second, the warmth rising to her cheeks. "Do you now?" she asked softly, trying to keep her tone casual. "Yes," he admitted. "I enjoy the simplicity, the quiet, and your company." Her heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to smile. "Well, I enjoy your company too. It makes the nights feel less lonely." He nodded, and for a long moment, they simply shared the silence. It was not awkward, but comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. The storm outside had quieted, leaving only the soft patter of rain against the windows, and in that moment, everything else, his status, her struggles, the city outside, faded into insignificance. Despite the growing connection, neither spoke of the unspoken tension. They were careful, each aware of the subtle boundaries of their interactions. She did not ask about his life beyond the cafe, and he did not reveal his secrets. And yet, every glance, every shared smile, every brief touch of the hand as she placed a cup of tea on his table spoke volumes. One particularly quiet night, he lingered after she had finished closing the cafe. The other customers had gone, leaving them alone amidst the soft glow of lamps and the faint scent of rain and coffee. "You know," he said softly, almost as if speaking to himself, "I don't think anyone's ever noticed me the way you do." Amara's hand froze mid-motion, wiping a counter. "Noticed you," she repeated gently. He nodded, gaze fixed on the table. "Not in the way that matters. People see me for what I have, or what I represent, but you see me as I am." Her breath caught, and she felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. I just noticed what's in front of me," she said quietly. "I don't care about what people think." He looked up, eyes locking with hers, and for a moment, the world outside seemed irrelevant. "You're extraordinary," he whispered. Amara felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she smiled, brushing it off lightly. "Extraordinary is a strong word for someone who just does her job," she replied, though her voice betrayed a hint of warmth she could not contain. And yet, neither of them moved, neither spoke further. The bond between them had shifted, subtle, yet undeniable. Every glance, every word, every quiet moment shared in the dim light of the cafe deepened a connection that neither fully understood. Over the next few nights, their interactions became tinged with a gentle intimacy. He would offer brief compliments, small gestures of gratitude, and occasionally, a playful remark that made her laugh. She found herself anticipating his arrival, noticing details about him she hadn't before. The curve of his smile, the way his fingers hovered over the keyboard when he was deep in thought, the quiet sighs that escaped him when he was overwhelmed. And in these small, quiet ways, their lives began to intertwine. Though the truth of who he was remained hidden, the emotional bond between them grew undeniable, delicate yet strong, like roots intertwining beneath the surface of soil. For Amara, these nights became a source of unexpected joy, a momentary escape from the weight of her responsibilities. For him, they became a sanctuary, a reminder that even in a world of power and pressure, human connection, genuine, uncalculated, was worth more than any success. And as the city lights shimmered through the rain-streaked windows, both of them silently understood. Whatever this was, it was changing them, one quiet, shared night at a time. The cafe had begun to feel like a world apart from the city outside, a sanctuary where time slowed and the pressures of life seemed to pause. For Amara, it had become a nightly routine she cherished. For Ethan, it was a place where he could breathe, even if only for a few hours, and where he could be seen as a human being rather than a powerful CEO. That Thursday night, the air was warmer than usual, with the faint scent of rain lingering from earlier. Amara rearranged chairs near the window, glancing over to see him entering the cafe, slightly damp from the drizzle. He gave her a small smile, and for a fleeting moment, the world outside their shared bubble seemed to vanish. "Evening," she greeted, pouring his usual chamomile tea. "Evening," he replied, settling into his corner seat. He looked tired, but there was a subtle lightness to his expression tonight, a hint of anticipation that had been absent in previous weeks. Amara paused for a moment, watching him. "You seem different tonight," she said, tilting her head. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Different? Perhaps," he said carefully. "I suppose there are moments that shift everything, even in ways you don't fully understand." She smiled softly, sensing the weight behind his words. "Sometimes the small things matter the most," she said gently. "A kind word, a shared laugh, even a cup of tea." He nodded, eyes following the steam rising from his cup. "You have a gift for noticing the small things," he admitted. "It's remarkable." Amara felt warmth rise to her cheeks, but quickly brushed it aside. "It's nothing," she murmured. "I just pay attention." For the next hour, they settled into their usual rhythm. Quiet conversation, gentle jokes, occasional silences filled with understanding. But tonight, there was an unspoken tension lingering in the air. Ethan seemed distracted, his gaze flickering toward the window more often than usual. Amara noticed the subtle shifts in his posture, the way he adjusted his watch, the way he stared at the streetlights reflecting in puddles outside. "You're thinking about something," she said finally, breaking the quiet. He looked at her, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "Perhaps," he admitted softly, "or perhaps I'm simply aware of how quickly time passes. How fleeting moments like these can be." Amara leaned on the counter slightly, curious. "You mean with work?" He nodded. "Partly, but also with life. With people. Sometimes we think we have more time than we do, and then something happens, and suddenly everything feels different." She studied him, sensing that he was speaking carefully, choosing his words. There was a gravity beneath his calm exterior, a subtle weight she couldn't fully grasp. "Are you afraid of change?" she asked softly. Ethan's lips curved in a faint, almost sad smile. "Not afraid," he said slowly, "but cautious. Change can be complicated, especially when it affects more than just yourself." Amara nodded, understanding in a way she couldn't articulate. "I get that. Sometimes even the smallest changes feel huge." He looked at her then, his gaze lingering longer than usual. "And yet," he said, voice quieter, "some changes are worth it." Before she could respond, the cafe door jingled again, and a small group of customers entered, breaking the fragile intimacy of the moment. Ethan packed his laptop briefly, glancing at Amara. "I should probably leave soon," he murmured. She felt a pang of disappointment, but smiled. "Of course. I'll see you tomorrow night." "Yes," he replied simply. But as he stepped toward the door, something unusual happened. He paused, glanced at a framed newspaper clipping hanging near the cafe counter, and his expression stiffened slightly. Amara noticed, but didn't say anything. She assumed it was just a reflex, a momentary distraction. What she didn't know was that the clipping contained a photograph of Ethan at a corporate gala, shaking hands with dignitaries, his name in bold letters beneath it. He moved quickly past it, as though afraid she would notice. But Amara's curiosity was piqued. There was something about him, something larger, something she couldn't place. Yet she dismissed the thought. It didn't matter who he was outside the cafe. All that mattered was that he was here now, quietly sharing the night with her. The following evening, she arrived at the cafe to find him already seated, laptop open, but his expression unusually guarded. "Good evening," she said, placing his tea beside him. "Good evening," he replied, voice flat. But there was an underlying tension she couldn't ignore. "You're distracted," she said gently. He looked at her, hesitating. "I suppose I am," he admitted. "Some matters outside this place demand attention." She nodded, sensing there was more he wanted to say but couldn't. "If you want to talk," she offered softly. He shook his head. "Not yet," he said quietly. "Some things must remain private, at least for now." Amara smiled faintly, respecting his boundary. But inside, a small seed of curiosity had taken root. Who was he really? Why did he move through the world with such careful precision, yet come here to this quiet cafe every night? Days passed, and the hints of his other life became more frequent. Subtle things, almost imperceptible. A car waiting outside that gleamed far too expensively for the modest cafe. A brief phone call that carried an authority beyond normal work. A mention of meetings with names that sounded official, important, powerful. Amara noticed these things, but chose not to dwell on them. She told herself it didn't matter, that the kindness she offered him was enough, and that she had no desire to enter a world so far removed from her own. And yet, the tension lingered, unspoken but growing. For Ethan, the nights at the cafe had become a delicate balance between connection and secrecy, between desire and caution. He wanted to reveal himself, to show her the life he led, but he feared it would shatter the simplicity and sincerity they shared. Tomorrow night, he thought, glancing at her across the table, I may have to decide whether to risk everything, whether to let her see me as I truly am, or lose the connection we've built. And for Amara, each night carried a quiet thrill, a growing bond that she didn't fully understand. She found herself wondering about him, imagining who he might be outside the cafe's walls, and yet never daring to ask too much. She felt something shift inside her, a cautious excitement, a subtle hope that whatever this was, it was worth holding on to. The reveal was approaching, though neither of them knew exactly when. And as the city lights flickered through rain-streaked windows, both felt it, the quiet, potent tension of something inevitable, something that would soon change the nights they shared forever. The cafe was unusually quiet that Thursday night, a subtle hush falling over the room as Amara moved from table to table, wiping surfaces and straightening chairs. She had sensed something different in the air, a tension that wasn't quite present on other nights. Perhaps it was the storm that had cleared earlier, leaving the city crisp and electric, or perhaps it was simply intuition, a quiet voice telling her that tonight would be unlike any other. Ethan arrived a few minutes later, as always, but tonight he seemed uneasy. He walked in, shoulders slightly hunched, a brief hesitation in his step. He avoided looking at her directly at first, instead setting his laptop bag carefully beside his chair. When he finally did meet her gaze, there was a flicker of something in his eyes she had never seen before, vulnerability tinged with apprehension. "Good evening," she said softly, placing his usual chamomile tea on the table. "Good evening," he replied, his voice quieter than usual. There was an edge of tension beneath his calm exterior. "You seem different tonight," she observed, tilting her head. "Is something wrong?" He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair as if wrestling with his own thoughts. I need to tell you something," he said finally, voice low and deliberate. "Something I should have shared a long time ago." Amara's heart skipped. She felt a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her tone steady, though her pulse quickened. Ethan hesitated, the familiar calm she had grown used to giving way to a rare openness. "I haven't been entirely honest with you," he admitted. "Not because I wanted to deceive you, but because I was afraid of changing what we have. Afraid that if you knew who I really am, you would see me differently." Her brow furrowed, a knot forming in her stomach. "What do you mean?" she asked, though a part of her already sensed the gravity behind his words. He looked down at the table, fingers tracing the edge of his teacup. "I'm not just anyone," he began slowly. "I don't live a quiet, ordinary life like you might think. I run a company, a large one that employs thousands, one that carries responsibilities far beyond what most people can imagine." Amara's eyes widened, disbelief flickering across her face. "You what?" "I'm a CEO," he said quietly, meeting her gaze at last. "A billionaire. And I know that changes everything, or at least it would seem that way. But I needed you to know. I wanted you to see me, not for what I own, not for my position, but for who I am." For a long moment, silence filled the space between them. Amara felt as though the floor had shifted beneath her. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind, each one heavier than the last. The kind, tired man she had come to care for, who had shared quiet nights, subtle smiles, and fleeting vulnerabilities, was not who she thought he was. He was someone else entirely, a world apart from the life she knew. She shook her head, trying to steady herself. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Her voice trembled, betraying the storm of emotions inside her. All this time, you let me see only part of you. I never wanted to hide from you, he said, voice earnest, eyes searching hers. I wanted to be honest, but I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew the truth, the connection we've built, the moments we've shared, wouldn't mean the same. I didn't want you to think I sought your kindness because of what I have, rather than who I am. Amara felt a rush of conflicting emotions, shock, confusion, a hint of betrayal, and, unexpectedly, a pang of anger. Do you have any idea what this feels like? She asked, her voice shaking. I've cared about you, for the person I thought you were. And now it's all different. How do I know any of it was real? Ethan's expression tightened, but he remained calm, his voice steady though filled with vulnerability. Everything I felt for you is real. Every moment, every laugh, every quiet night, it has all been genuine. My fear was only that my identity would overshadow what we've built. She looked down, gripping the edge of the table, her mind spinning. She thought of the small gestures, the late-night conversations, the subtle ways he had relied on her presence without ever forcing intimacy. All of it had felt real. Could still be real, now that she knew. I just need a moment, she said finally, her voice barely audible. She rose from the chair, stepping toward the cafe door. The cool night air hit her like a shock, a mix of clarity and disbelief. Ethan watched her go, heart pounding, fear and hope intermingling. He wanted to reach for her, to assure her that everything he had said was true, but he knew she needed space. She needed to process the enormity of the revelation. The streets were wet with lingering rain, streetlights reflecting in puddles like scattered diamonds. Amara walked slowly, every step heavy with emotion. She replayed his words in her mind, struggling to reconcile the man she had known with the life he had just revealed. CEO, billionaire, a world she could never imagine. And yet, beneath the shock and the swirl of doubt, there was a stubborn thread she couldn't ignore. The kindness he had shown, the moments he had shared, they had been real. They had mattered. Even if his life was extraordinary, even if the world outside the cafe demanded perfection and authority, the connection they had built had been genuine. Returning home, she sat on the edge of her modest bed, staring at the walls of her small apartment. She thought of him, of the quiet way he had valued her presence, of the subtle vulnerabilities he had shared. And slowly, amid the confusion, she realized something crucial. The man she had come to care for had always been himself with her, stripped of pretense. The next day, she arrived at the cafe early, her thoughts a whirlwind. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face him, to speak, to understand fully. But she knew one thing. The bond they shared could not be dismissed, no matter how overwhelming the truth was. When Ethan arrived that evening, he looked different. Anxious, yet hopeful. He saw her pause at the doorway, her eyes wide with the unspoken questions that mirrored his own fears. Amara, he said softly, voice tentative. I understand if you need time. But please know, everything I've felt for you, everything I've shared, has been real. I am me, even beyond the office, beyond the wealth, even beyond the titles. She stepped forward, her gaze steadying. And for the first time since the revelation, she felt a small measure of clarity. The world outside their cafe might be vast, intimidating, and unequal. But here, in this quiet corner of the night, the truth could coexist with their connection. I need to trust that, she said slowly, her voice soft but firm. Because the moments we've shared, they were real. And maybe so is this. Ethan's shoulders relaxed slightly, a genuine smile spreading across his face. Then, maybe we can start from here, he said quietly, eyes locked on hers. For the first time, the truth was out. And though it had shocked her, challenged her, and tested the fragile trust between them, it had not destroyed what they had built. Instead, it had made it more honest, more tangible, and infinitely more profound. The cafe felt smaller that evening, though Amara couldn't tell if it was the familiar warmth or the weight of what had been revealed. Everything had changed, and yet, in the same quiet corners and under the soft glow of the lamps, she found herself returning to the routine that had once been simple but now felt charged with a new intensity. Ethan arrived later than usual, as if he, too, felt the need to tread carefully. He walked in, eyes scanning the room before settling on her. The usual ease in his posture was replaced by hesitation, a subtle tension that made her chest tighten. She wanted to smile, to reach across the space between them, but she held back, unsure if she could trust what she still felt. "Good evening," she said quietly, placing his usual chamomile tea on the table. "Good evening," he replied, his voice soft, cautious. He lingered near the doorway for a moment before stepping fully inside, as if measuring the distance between them both physically and emotionally. Amara studied him, noting the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "You're careful tonight," she observed, choosing her words with care. "I suppose I would be too." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I'm trying to respect what's happened, and to give you space to decide what this all means." Her hands gripped the edge of the counter as she considered his words. "Ethan, I don't know what to think sometimes," she admitted, voice low. "You're extraordinary, yes, but you're also complicated. I've trusted you before, and now everything feels bigger, harder to navigate." He nodded again, eyes earnest. "I understand, and I don't expect forgiveness or understanding immediately. But I want you to know, everything I've shared, everything I've felt for you is real. Even beyond the facade, beyond the titles, beyond the world you can't yet see." Her heart softened slightly, the words carrying a weight that resonated with her own feelings. She had been drawn to him for who he was, not for what he represented, and the revelation, while shocking, had not erased the bond they had built. She realized that perhaps she had been afraid of what wealth and status might change. But the man she cared for was still here, still human, still genuine. For the next hour, conversation flowed more naturally than it had in the previous nights. Ethan spoke sparingly about his work, careful not to overwhelm her with the magnitude of his responsibilities, but enough to show her glimpses of the world he inhabited. And Amara, in turn, shared more of her own life. The small victories, the quiet struggles, the moments that defined her daily existence. "I never realized," he said softly, "how much strength it takes to manage life like yours. Every day, you balance so many responsibilities, and yet you still find room for kindness." Amara smiled faintly. "I've had to learn," she replied. "Life doesn't give you options sometimes. You just make do, and you notice the people around you when you can. That's all." He reached out, hesitating slightly, then gently brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. The gesture was delicate, intimate, and carried with it an unspoken apology for the past shock, a reassurance for the present, and a promise for the future. "You notice," he said quietly, eyes locking with hers. "And that means more than you can know." Her breath caught, a flutter of emotion she could not contain. I notice you too," she admitted softly, the words tentative but sincere. For the first time since the revelation, a subtle shift occurred between them. The tension that had hung over their interactions eased, replaced by a cautious warmth. Trust, once fractured by truth, began to mend in the shared vulnerability and quiet honesty of the moment. They continued talking long into the evening, laughter threading through their words, gentle teasing, and soft smiles that conveyed more than conversation ever could. The storm outside had long passed, leaving only the gentle hum of the city beyond the cafe's walls. Inside, there was a fragile intimacy, a shared understanding that neither wealth nor status could diminish. As the clock approached midnight, Ethan stood, gathering his things. He hesitated, glancing at Amara with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Amara, I know this isn't easy, and I know I've complicated things, but would you stay with me a little longer tonight? Just to talk? No distractions, no obligations. Amara considered the request, her heart responding before her mind fully processed. She nodded slowly. Yes, I think I'd like that. They moved to a small table by the window, the streetlights casting gentle reflections across their faces. Conversation flowed easily now, punctuated by pauses that were comfortable rather than awkward. For the first time since the revelation, they were simply two people, two humans, stripped of titles, stripped of pretense, finding solace in each other's presence. Ethan, she said softly, reaching across the table, I don't regret the nights we've shared, or the bond we've built. Even knowing who you are, I still want this. I want to understand you, and I want to see where this goes. His chest rose with a quiet relief, eyes bright with emotion. Amara, you have no idea how much that means to me. I was afraid, terrified, that I would lose everything by telling you. But you've shown me that connection isn't about wealth or power or status. It's about being seen, truly seen, and you've done that for me. Her hand found his across the table, fingers intertwining with a tentative, tender certainty. The simple touch carried with it forgiveness, trust, and the beginning of something new, something stronger than the secrets and revelations that had preceded it. For a long moment, they simply sat together, hands clasped, hearts quietly aligning in a rhythm that needed no words. Outside, the city moved on. Bright lights, rushing cars, people chasing their own lives. But inside the cafe, time seemed to pause. And in that pause, in that quiet intimacy, they both understood that trust could be rebuilt. That even after shock, even after doubt, the bond between them had grown stronger. That the connection forged in quiet nights, shared smiles, and small gestures of care was real, resilient, and capable of withstanding anything, even the weight of truth. As the night wore on, Amara rested her head briefly against Ethan's shoulder, a small gesture of trust and closeness. He responded by wrapping an arm gently around her, careful not to overwhelm, careful to honor the boundaries that had been tested and respected. It was not a grand declaration, not a dramatic confession. It was a quiet acknowledgement of mutual understanding, of hearts tentatively intertwining in the safe space they had created. And for both of them, that was enough. Tonight marked the beginning of something new. Trust, once fractured, was being rebuilt. Hearts, once cautious, were opening slowly, carefully, but with an undeniable certainty. And in the quiet glow of the cafe, with rain-slicked streets outside and the scent of tea and coffee mingling in the air, Amara and Ethan began to step forward together, toward something stronger, something real, something that neither status nor circumstance could take away. The city was alive with lights, the streets glimmering like rivers of gold under the night sky. Yet inside the quiet cafe, Amara and Ethan existed in their own world, a sanctuary carved out of ordinary moments and extraordinary connection. The weeks since the revelation of his true identity had passed with gentle care, conversations deepened, trust rebuilt, and an intimacy that neither had anticipated growing stronger each night. Tonight felt different. There was a subtle electricity in the air, a promise that something meaningful was about to change. Amara arrived early, as was her habit, but she found herself lingering near the doorway, heart beating faster than usual. Perhaps it was anticipation, perhaps it was hope. Either way, she could not ignore the fluttering in her chest. Ethan arrived shortly after, carrying his laptop, but with a lightness in his step that had been absent before. He paused at the entrance, eyes scanning the cafe until they met hers. The warmth in his gaze made her breath catch. Tonight, she realized the barrier between them felt thinner than ever. "Good evening," she said softly, pouring his chamomile tea. "Good evening," he replied, settling into his corner seat, his eyes never leaving hers. There was a quiet intensity to the way he looked at her, a depth that spoke of feelings long restrained but finally allowed to surface. The evening began as usual, small talk gradually giving way to shared laughter, gentle teasing, and moments of comfortable silence. But beneath the surface, there was a current of unspoken emotion, a tension that neither dared to name, yet both felt acutely. At one point, Ethan set aside his laptop, leaning back in his chair. "Amara," he said softly, voice low enough to make her lean in closer. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you. Something I've wanted to say for a while." Her heart skipped, nerves and excitement intertwining. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. He reached across the table, taking her hands in his with careful tenderness. "I know the truth about me surprised you," he said, eyes locking on hers. "And I know it hasn't been easy. But through it all, you've remained genuine, kind, and understanding. And that has made me realize something important. I don't want to imagine my life without you in it." Amara felt her pulse quicken, the weight of his words settling around her like a warm embrace. "Ethan, she struggled to find the words because what she felt was too immense, too profound for simple sentences. "I've cared about you from the very beginning, even before I knew who you really were." A soft smile spread across his face, a mixture of relief and joy lighting his features. "Then perhaps we can take this next step together," he said, "not as CEO and waitress, not as two strangers from different worlds, but as ourselves, simply as Ethan and Amara." Her hands tightened around his, a firm yet gentle affirmation. "Yes," she whispered, eyes glistening. "As ourselves. That's all I've ever wanted." The rest of the night passed in a blur of quiet joy. Words, smiles, and small touches conveyed everything that neither could fully articulate. The city outside was a chaotic blur, but inside the café, time slowed, allowing them to savor the intimacy they had fought to preserve. In the weeks that followed, their relationship deepened, marked by mutual respect, understanding, and a sense of partnership that transcended status or wealth. Ethan invited Amara into his world gradually, showing her glimpses of a life he led without overwhelming her, always careful to maintain the simplicity and sincerity that had drawn them together in the first place. Amara, for her part, embraced the new reality with grace and courage. She adapted to the wealth and privilege surrounding Ethan, but she never lost herself or her grounded perspective. The modest apartment, the quiet habits, the kindness she extended to everyone around her. These were the foundations of who she was, and Ethan admired and cherished them more with each passing day. One evening, as they walked together along a quiet, tree-lined street after the cafe had closed, Ethan stopped, turning to face her. The city lights cast a gentle glow on their faces, reflecting in her eyes. "Amara," he said, taking both her hands in his, "I want you to know something. I don't just love the moments we share. I love you. Every part of you. Your strength, your kindness, your heart. I love who you are, and I want to be with you fully, completely." Tears welled in her eyes, a mix of happiness and relief. "Ethan, I love you too. I always have. And I want that too. Fully, completely." They stood there for a long moment, hands intertwined, hearts aligned, and the city around them fading into the background. In that space, there were no roles, no expectations, no pressures, only the truth of their love, honest and unshakable. From that night onward, their lives moved forward together. Ethan's world of boardrooms, meetings, and corporate responsibilities existed alongside Amara's grounded, nurturing life. They balanced each other. He brought stability, security, and protection. She brought warmth, perspective, and authenticity. Together, they navigated the complexities of their worlds without losing the essence of what had brought them together. Months later, the cafe remained their special place, a sanctuary that had witnessed the beginning of their story. Even as life outside demanded attention and effort, they returned to that corner table, sharing quiet nights filled with conversation, laughter, and the comforting simplicity that had defined their early connection. And one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a golden glow. Ethan looked at Amara with a mixture of admiration and awe. "You've changed my life," he said softly. "Not because of what I have, but because of who you are. You've taught me that love, trust, and kindness are more valuable than anything else in this world." Amara smiled, warmth flooding her heart. "And you've shown me that even in a world of chaos and responsibility, there's room for connection, for love, for hope." They leaned into each other, sharing a quiet, tender kiss as the city buzzed around them. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Past fears, social divides, or secrets revealed. They had each other fully and completely, and that was enough. As night fell and the cafe lights flickered softly in the distance, Ethan and Amara walked hand in hand into the world they would now face together. Their journey had begun with chance, nurtured through kindness, tested by truth, and strengthened by love. And as they stepped forward into the future, they knew one thing for certain. Together, they could face anything, and nothing would ever break the bond they had built.